Nuestra conferenciante invitada es Giovanna Campello, que durante 20 años de experiencia en las Naciones Unidas pues ha trabajado fundamentalmente en el ámbito de mejorar la prevención de drogas aplicada y sobre todo apoyada en la evidencia científica. Más notablemente en este contexto, ella ha liderado la publicación de los estándares internacionales de prevención del uso de drogas que se publicaron en 2013 y una segunda edición actualizada en el 2018. Desde el 2016 ha sido líder, ha estado liderando, ¿no?, la Oficina de Naciones Unidas, la sección de esta Oficina de las Naciones Unidas de Rehabilitación, de Tratamiento y Prevención, promoviendo el trabajo basado en la evidencia y la práctica sensible al género y al derecho, y a la política de género y a los derechos humanos en la prevención, en el tratamiento, en los cuidados y en la rehabilitación en el campo de las drogas, así como en el campo de las drogas reguladas y con propósitos médicos, ¿no? Miss Campello tiene es licenciada en ciencia en relaciones internacionales, en la ciencia de las relaciones internacionales por la London School of Economics and Political Science, y es máster en desarrollo, en género, del Instituto de Estudios de Desarrollo de la Universidad de Sussex, ambas en el Reino Unido. Y ahora voy a intentar hacerlo lo mismo en inglés, directamente con ella. Welcome, Ms. Giovanna Campello, to this opening ceremony of the 5th edition of the Master Degree in Addictions, a Biopsychosocial Perspective, promoted by the University of Oviedo in collaboration with Proyecto Hombre Association. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. This is a master's degree where we want to bring the theoretical and academic study of addiction closer to clinical and social interventions applied to prevention, treatment, or rehabilitation. In this sense, her outstanding career is an example of this academic and professional concern. Just a few words to introduce to our guest speaker. Ms. Giovanna Campello has more than 20 years of experience with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime in supporting member states and national stakeholders at all levels in improving the drug prevention response, applying and contributing to scientific evidence. Most notably, in this context, she has led to the publication of the International Standard of Drug Use Prevention in 2013 and the second updated edition in 2018. Since 2016, she has been leading the Prevention, Treatment and Rehabilitation section of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, thus promoting evidence-based gender and human rights sensitive practice on drug prevention, treatment, care, and rehabilitation, as well as access to controlled drug and medical purpose. Ms. Campello has Bachelor of Science in International Relations from the London School of Economics and Political Science and a Master of Arts in Gender and Development from the Institute of Development Studies of the University of Sussex, both in UK, United Kingdom. Without further delay, I give the floor to Ms. Giovanna Campello.
Thank you, Professor Fernandez, Director of the Master. And if you give me just 1 second, I'm also trying to start my presentation. Okay. And I hope this works. Share. Yes, maybe. And I wanted to start from with thanking you all for this huge honor to open the academic year of this Master on Addiction organized by the University of Oviedo and Proyecto Hombre. Of course, I would like to thank the Vice Rector del COS, the President Arana, the General Director Prevención, and Professor Fernandez, the Director of the Master. They have already opened this session and introduced me with such kind words. And but I would also like to salute all of you that are participating and that I already consider you colleagues and friends because of your obvious interest and commitment to evidence-based prevention and treatment, which is a commitment that is really rare all around the world. In our field, where a lot of ideology and improvisation still unfortunately have a lot of importance, to be able to speak in front of people that have committed their entire careers to helping people with drug use disorder and preventing drug use disorders and documenting this in a rigorous and scientific way, and to transmit this knowledge in a rigorous and scientific way with the partnership to university is a huge honor. And I hope I will do justice to your commitment. And what I would like to do is to use this next half an hour to provide you some ideas and inspiration that I have found in studying the science of prevention of drug use. Of course, our field is so much broader, but that's where I have invested a lot of my professional energy, and where I hope I can provide you some new ideas, fresh ideas of inspiration, hoping that this means a collaboration that will go on and on in the future. And before I start, let me tell you a tiny bit why we started to develop the international standards on prevention. And let me tell you a little story of, I had been working for UNODC, for the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, for quite a bit already. And I had, been studying the science of prevention and the amazing result that you could obtain by using prevention based on science. And then I'm making a presentation to the delegation of the United Nations. And one delegate of a country that I will not name, of course, raised his hand and he said, "This is all very interesting, but that's a bit peculiar, right? I mean, you're talking about prevention, effectiveness. Prevention doesn't really work, does it?" And, you can imagine me, I was in front of all of the member states and I'm thinking, no, it does. And there is a lot of science. And so I explain a little bit there, but this is when I started to think that I really needed to sit down and summarize the science to bring it at the opportunity, put it at the disposal of everybody all around the world. And this is how and why we started developing the, let me see if this thing doesn't move very much, the international standards. And as Professor Fernandez already mentioned, we did a first edition in 2013, and I'm really presenting to you some issues from the second edition that we published in 2018, together with the WHO, with the World Health Organization. And I want to tell you a tiny bit about how we developed this. You all participate in a master together with the university. And so I'm hoping, and I know that you take the methodology, the scientific methodology, very seriously. So just to reassure you that, first of all, we were, WHO and UNODC, we were not alone. We were together with experts from more than 100 experts from almost 50 countries. And this is the flow diagram of the scientific process that we followed. And of course, I can go through it in depth if you want, but just to reassure you that we followed a very rigorous process. At the same time, I was also trying to be very inclusive. I told everybody, any study, any language, send it to me, please. Send it to me. I will find a way to translate it. If it is good science, we will use it. And so this is the process that we followed to collect all of these studies and then go through them and see that they were following solid scientific methodology, and then extract the conclusions. And the standards are based on these conclusions. And just this is an example that I give to people to illustrate the kind of studies that we were looking for. And maybe this is redundant for you, but I think it will be maybe familiar to you, the fact that at least in prevention, when people say, oh, I have evaluated my prevention program, and I say, great, give me your study, then they present to me a study that says 90% of the children were very happy to participate in the program. And I'm very happy too, but this is not being effective, right? The studies that we were looking for and that we have included in the standards present this kind of result. Look at this study. This study looks at an intervention that is delivered to children that are 2 to 5 years of age. You heard that right. This is an intervention that you do in kindergarten. And in the blue group, you have the children that did the program, and in the red, you have the children that did not do the program. And they followed these children from when they were 2 to 5 to when they were 21. And you can see that at 21, the children that had done the program had less marijuana use, less rates of teenage pregnancy, and more enrollment in college. So the kind of studies that are at the basis of the standards really look as to whether, as a result of your program, there is less use, there is better health, there are better social outcomes. Happiness is important, but it's not enough, okay? So these are the kind of studies on which the standards are used, are based. And I want to tell you a little bit of what we found out in general, and then a bit more in detail. So in general, I think we found out something that to you all, and particularly to the colleagues from Proyecto Hombre that have been working with people with drug use disorder for such a long time, and the fact that we really need to change our perspective on prevention. So generally, to people that have not studied prevention science, the idea of prevention is like this. People do not know that drugs are dangerous. Therefore, they start to use drugs. Therefore, to prevent, I need to provide information about the dangers of drugs. And okay, there is a lot of truth there, right? This is a very famous graph from the United States. And as you can see, in the green line, you have marijuana use by year. And in the blue line is the perceived harm. So how much youth, 18 years old, thought that marijuana use was dangerous. If the perceived harm was going down, the use was going up. And while this is only an association, we know as scientists this is not causal necessarily. This is very powerful. This graph is almost a mirror image. So yes, providing information about the danger of drugs is important, but it's not the entire story. Look at this other graph. This is from a study of 17,000 parents and children, 17,000. And as you can see, the graph gives you how much the probability of using inhalants in this case, and there is another group, another similar graph for cannabis. And you can see that the more parental monitoring there is, the less probability of use. So parental monitoring is very important in terms of protecting children and youth. School is very important. This is a graph, again, from 18 years old, comparing 18 years old in school. This is the light green, and out of school, dark green. And as you can see, the youth out of school uses more any kind of substances. And we also know that adverse childhood experiences are very important in making people vulnerable to using, and this interacts very much with inequalities. So we know that adverse childhood experiences are associated to substance abuse, but we also know that, for example, if you take a group in this study, this was a study in England, a group of higher income individual with 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, 4% experience substance use disorders. But lower income individuals with the same amount of adverse childhood experiences were 3 times as much affected by substance use disorder. And this is a very recent publication by my former boss, Dr. Gerra, that some of you might know. And he has analyzed, together with the colleagues in ESPAD, the data from more than 50,000 students in 28 European countries. And you can see very clearly that frequent use of cannabis is associated with lower socioeconomic status. So there is this part of the arrow that seems so simple is in reality much more complex. It looks a bit more like this. There are many, many factors in the environment and in the individual that increase the vulnerability to using substances. And this is a more recent nice graph design from our colleagues in the World Drug Report that shows very clearly the balance between risk and protective factors. And there are vulnerabilities both at the personal and environmental levels. Now, what we know from science, and what I'm going to show you is old science from 1992, but still relevant, is that these vulnerabilities are common to many risky behaviors. So here you have risk factors at the individual level, in schools, in families, and in the community. And if I go back, you can see that they are common to substance abuse, delinquency, teen pregnancy, school dropout, violence, depression, and anxiety. This is a simplified version of what I've just shown to you. And all of this science has various implications. One implication is that this last part of the arrow also becomes very different. So prevention is not equal to information. Evidence-based prevention is equal to a lot of interventions that have been found to be effective and with many ages and in many settings. But the other great thing is that remember that the vulnerabilities are common to different risky behaviors. This means that if you do evidence-based prevention, you not only prevent drug use disorder, not only you prevent substance use disorder, you prevent mental health, violent behavior and delinquency, you promote mental health, better school performance, less risky sexual behaviors. And this is great because this means that our work has such much higher and broader significance than just preventing drug use and drug use disorder, which is already incredible. And really, we are talking about supporting the healthy and safe development of children and the well-being of youth and adults. And I think that this is maybe a dry version of what the General Director Prevención has already so eloquently described in the work of Proyecto, Hombre, which is really about the person and not the disease, the small thing. Is about the healthy and safe development and well-being of people. And so, of course, sometimes also money is important, right? So you will not be surprised to know, with all these great results, that evidence-based prevention is cost-effective as well. And this is a very conservative thing that I'm showing to you. Calculation. For every $1 spent in prevention, at least 10 are saved later in life. In fact, there are calculations that say that the savings are much higher, but they are on particular intervention. And I wanted to give you a very safe number that you can quote to your policymakers when you are asking them for resources for evidence-based prevention. So how does evidence-based prevention look like? And this is where I want to go into a bit of detail on what there is in the prevention standards. Of course, normally I can speak for 3 days on the standards, and so I will give you a little bit of flavor. And I hope, but I hope that I can give you some particular ideas about what you can find in the standards. And I will organize this around messages. So, first message. Evidence-based prevention looks like this: the earlier, the better. And really, we need to start thinking much younger than adolescents, much, much younger. In fact, I think we should start thinking about pregnancy and infancy as well. And I want to give you some example. For example, there is a very famous and excellent intervention, which is prenatal and infancy visit, where a trained nurse and social worker visits mothers-to-be and new mothers to provide parenting skill and addressing a range of socioeconomic issues, health, housing, employment. Of course, these are very intensive kind of services. Unfortunately, you cannot give them to all women, but this is particularly used with women in difficult circumstances. And we have found that this kind of intervention can prevent substance use later in life, promotes mental health, and WHO recommends this kind of intervention against child maltreatment. Then there is a lot that you can do with pregnant women. First of all pregnant women should be provided advice on the potential risk of substance use during pregnancy to themselves and to the child to be. But if there is a case of drug use disorder, voluntary and evidence-based treatment is an amazing opportunity to turn around the health and life of mothers and children to be. And in this, we have really clear and useful guidelines from the World Health Organization itself. And then there is early childhood education. You can work with children at kindergarten age, 2 to 5, and you basically provide, you work in deprived communities and provide special, strong education to develop the social and cognitive capacities of the children. And you also help the families with socioeconomic issues. And this is the program that I was showing to you before, that has this kind of program has such good kind of results. It prevents use of all substances and risky behaviors and promotes mental health, social inclusion, and academic success. This moving on to still very young age, to primary school, this is a program that has a terrible, terrible title: Classroom Environment Improvement. I'm sorry, we could not find a better title, but basically what I mean, let me show you an example, is this kind of things. It's a game that teachers play where teams are encouraged, of children, are encouraged to behave well and help each other in behave well, and the good behavior is celebrated and rewarded. And in this way, of course, you give less importance to the bad behavior. And look at some of the results. This is amazing, that you can achieve with this kind of program. In general, they are very effective, and they have been found to prevent a range of risky behaviors later in life and promote mental health. But what I want to show you, what I'm showing you here, is what they do with children that are aggressive in primary school. And as you can imagine, children that are aggressive in primary school are particularly vulnerable to develop risky behavior. And at the same time, this is you don't want to stigmatize, right? You don't want to say, you are very aggressive, come with me to a special class. You don't want to say that. You do, but this program you do for all children. And yet look at the graph. The graph tells you the more you go to the right on the horizontal axis, the more aggressive the child was when he or she was in primary school. And at age 21, the probability of them using drugs is still lower, much lower, even if they were very aggressive, than the kids that did not do the program. And this for me is what I mean when I say prevention really works. Prevention really can help the healthy and safe development of children and youth. These are the kind of things that I'm talking about. So I hope I've given you some idea about why it is important to start early. Another thing that is important is to focus on child development more than information. And I'm looking at the clock, and I know that I tend to talk a little bit too much about these things because they are so close to my heart. So I will give you, I will skip the example on personal and social skills education in primary school, although it's very effective as well. And I want to tell you a bit more about the parenting skills program, because that is one of the most important discoveries that we have made in studying the standards, how effective they are. And these are programs that help parents to be better parents in very simple ways. No lecture, no psychological jargon, only very basic activities for parents and children alone and together. So for example, let me give you a little example. This is one from our own program, and it's an exercise that parents and children do to recognize stress in themselves and in the other. So parents recognize the stress of the children, and children recognize the stress of the parents, and learn how to cope with this. And then there is an exercise all together where children and parents guess how stressed the other is in certain situation. And think about it. Who do you think is better, the parents or the children to guess? I leave you 1 second to think about. I've always thought that the parents would be better, but the children are so much better. And it's such an emotional moment when we bring the two groups together and they realize, the parents realize how little they are able to recognize the stress in their children, and how changing their attitude can change the functioning and the behavior of the children for everybody. It's a powerful moment. And these programs all work like that. And we have been working with them all around the world, and we know they are effective in very violent communities. They are effective in very poor communities. We have used them with refugees and displaced populations. We know that they are effective for both boys and girls, and this is an example of effectiveness in girls, and this is again with our refugee groups with both boys and girls. And they have been recommended by the World Health Organizations because they have been found to be effective in preventing violence, particularly youth violence and child maltreatment. And they are so important that we have developed our own programs that are very, they use very little resources and can be used in any community around the world. And parenting for us, it's such a key protective factor that because of the pandemic, we have developed a range of resources for parents to cope with the stress of the pandemic in a positive way. And all of these resources are available on our website in many, many languages, including some in Spanish as well. So I hope that I've given you at least some idea of why focusing on the development of the children is so important. And I will try to go through the other messages a little bit more faster. The next message is, of course, it's never too late, and there are interventions that have been proven effective in preventing drug use, also for young adults and older adults like some of us, right? And I'm referring particularly to screening and brief intervention and prevention in the workplace. Some programs that have been found to be effective, and I can talk more, of course, if needed. Then there is the need of using an evidence-based program, or at least evidence-based characteristics. Now, I'm talking to a university, so I think I don't need to elaborate too much on the importance of using evidence-based program and adapting them very respectfully and rigorously to local culture. This is what we have been doing all around the world. This is an example of one of the programs that we used, and that has been tested also in Spain, of course, unplugged. And but what I want to tell you is that there are resources out there for you to find evidence-based program, particularly at the colleagues in the EMCDDA in Lisbon. And it is effective. This is an evaluation from one of our own program. And adapting programs locally is such a delicate process that we have an entire chapter in one of our publication just devoted to that. And it's all about trying the dress first before making changes. You take an evidence-based program, try it first as it is. Then you start making changes if there are problems. But please do a first implementation as close to the original as possible, because that is the program that has been evaluated to be effective. And we have been doing this all around the world with good results, but there will be places and instances in which you don't have access to an evidence-based program. And in that case, you can look in the standards, because for each of the intervention in the standards, we tell you what works and what doesn't work. And at least you can see whether you are in the right direction. I will skip the example. And I will go to the last, to my last message, which is we need to work in as many settings as possible. And here I want to offer you another example from the science of a group of kids, 12-year-old, that was followed until they were 18. And as you can see in the green line, already doing an evidence-based school program had a good effect in lowering the prevalence of the non-medical use of prescription opioids. So very good. But if you added family-based program, you had better results. So really, and from the standards, we know that there are many settings where you can work. I already mentioned the family, the school, and the workplace, but you can work in the health sector, in the community, including policies and media, and entertainment venues. And here you have all of the settings from the standards. And I'm almost done, because now I hope I'm finished with at least the main messages that I wanted to give you. And I hope I've given you an idea about how science tells us that our work in prevention of drug use can be really powerful and can really change the life of children and youth for the better and develop them holistically. And I hope that not only you will have great success in your master, but that you will be able to apply all of the things that you will learn in the master, and that we will keep in touch, and that we will be working together to really export this experience all around the world. I thank you so very much for having me.